Okay, welcome to our first introduction and discussion about Fusion 360 software. As mentioned before, Fusion is a great design tool used by industrial designers, engineers, product designers, and hobbyists and creatives such as yourselves. Fusion is made by Autodesk, and as students of RMIT, you can access an educational license free of charge. If you have a look in the 3D Printing for Creatives announcements, you will see that I posted under the title Housework a couple of things that you'll need to do to get started. Note, if you haven't done your workshop inductions, really important you get that done. But in terms of Fusion 360, here is the link to get your educational license. Okay, so click on that link, and it'll bring you across, and you'll need to create an account. Create that account with your student email, so your RMIT student email. Once you've done that, it will give you a download link for Fusion 360, which is generated off your Autodesk account, and then you log in. Download that, install the software. The other thing is vital is that you have a 3-button mouse. This is just an example I found from a local store in Melbourne, Officeworks. You really don't need anything more complicated than this. Obviously you can go wireless and laser and all sorts of things, but it's just critical that you have a 3-button mouse with a scroll wheel. Okay, 1 button, 2 button, the scroll wheel clicks and it also scrolls. So you need to make sure that you have these 2 things before you can continue on with this. So today what I want to do is I'm just going to bring you through some of the basic understanding of what Fusion is and how it operates. Okay? And then in subsequent videos, combined with Autodesk's online videos, we're going to try and bring you up to speed with the modeling tools available to you. So I'm going to open up Fusion 360, and here we are inside the software. Okay? For those of you who have used some CAD modeling software before, this may seem all too familiar. For others, this may be fine. Okay? Essentially, the first thing to understand is that Fusion 360 is a 3-dimensional workspace. Okay? And you can see that by holding my 3rd click, I can move around this workspace. Okay? Just a note for some of you, I am a SolidWorks native, and so the shortcuts and the mouse clicks I'm using are native for SolidWorks, and I encourage you to do the same. To get to that, go to Quick Setup. You want to make sure your default setup is millimeters, and just change this to SolidWorks. You'll probably find that yours is new to CAD. Go to SolidWorks and then hit Close. So now that 3rd click enables you to rotate around your 3-dimensional space. Okay? At the moment, all we can see in this 3-dimensional space, when I zoom in with the scroll wheel, is what we call a plane, which is this object here. And you can see this plane has got a grid on it, okay? And it's got a couple of lines. If we come across and look here, we have what's called the view cube. View cube is very useful for orientation, okay? Also gives us a hint to where we are within our modeling space. If we hit this home button, that will bring us back, essentially like a browser. In a web page, for a web browser, it'll bring us back to our home point. Okay? So if you ever get lost, hit that home button and you can come back. Looking at the view cube a bit closer, I can grab the cube and I can drag it around, and you can see that's allowing me to rotate as I was with the 3rd click. I can also hover and click on faces of the cube, and I can rotate around the cube, okay, and it will bring me around in a 2-dimensional viewport. Okay, so now we're looking at these planes in 2 dimensions instead of 3. Come back to our home point, we can see we're back in a 3-dimensional workspace. We can actually rotate around and get ourselves basically to a 2-dimensional point, but clicking on that gives us a nice straight down two-dimensional viewpoint. It's really important for sketching inside Fusion, which we're going to cover in a second. So this is our view cube. Really useful to take advantage of that if you're getting lost. The next thing I want you to look at is this bar down the bottom. So when I third click, you can see that the mouse is changing to this guy just here, which is free orbit. That's this orbit around the space. If I come across and click on pan, I've gone to a pan icon, and by using my left click, I'm panning around the object. If I switch to zoom and draw in and out, I can zoom in. Okay? Hitting the escape key will bring me back to a normal cursor or a select cursor. Typically, I find I use those quite rarely with the SolidWorks setup, because essentially orbiting, that's the big tool that you're going to use regularly. The others not so much. It's also a fit view when you have model space in there, when you have architecture that you've modeled, and it will bring everything to fit. The next thing that's useful is your visual style, where you can adjust things. You can adjust how something is shown. The meshing, the environment, whether you want to go into a dark sky or something a little bit easier to navigate. I find actually modeling in a white workspace is the easiest. And then you can have some effects, so ground plane, shadows, and so on. One important thing just to note here, and we'll look at it again later, is the camera and how it's displaying your modeling space. So at the moment we're in orthographic, and the best way I can explain it is if we lay the plane down over on its side like this, or if we go to the front, and then we just shift up a little bit like this, you'll see that these lines appear to be moving away from each other. Okay? If I switch that display setting to perspective, suddenly it looks a lot more natural. Those lines are converging on a point on the horizon, i.e. perspective. When we model in Fusion, we have the option to go orthographic or perspective. Orthographic tends to actually, whilst it looks odd, tends to actually be a more robust way of engaging with the CAD software and modeling. It's become more obvious down the track, but with sketches and extrusions and things, you will find that if you're in perspective, you will have difficulty being able to tell whether things are lined up or not, whereas orthographic, which is a projection method that's been around well before 3D modeling and harks back to physical drawing, is a much more robust way of being able to draw within a modeling workspace in 3 dimensions. But it's something to consider if you're looking at it and you find it a bit strange. You can switch those there. The other thing is our grids and snaps. So you can see we've got options to have our grids, which we've got there, turn the grids off, turn the grids on, and also snaps. I tend to model without the snaps. They annoy me, but you're more than welcome to model with them. Those of you that have modeled in other software, such as Cinema 4D or Rhino, might be used to this, which is essentially giving you 4 viewports. So we have our perspective viewport, and then we have our top, our front, and our right views. Okay? Again, with Fusion 360, because you've got that view cube and you can navigate so quickly and easily, I actually find you don't really tend to need a 4 view because you can jump really fast between different things. Okay? So this is our display settings down the bottom here. Next thing I want you to come across and have a look at is the browser tree over here. You can hide the browser tree to give us more room. We can open it up. And essentially the browser tree is the catalog of the elements within our file. At the moment, we actually don't have a lot in here, save for the origin and the respective axes and planes. As we model, this will populate with more and more elements within the CAD file. So we've got our origin in the center, we've got our X, Y, and Z axis, which you can also see on the view cube, and then our X, Y, X, Z, Y, Z planes. Okay? Those planes are a combination of in this case, the Y and the Z axis makes that two-dimensional plane. Really important thing here is our origin, okay? And the origin is the center of our CAD universe. That's the center of our modeling environment. When we start to draw and put our elements together, the origin will be a really useful reference point. Okay, we can dimension from that, we can set objects to that. It's a really important thing to be aware of. Okay. I'll also see some document settings, which is handy here. I can see the green millimeters, and as we can begin to populate with geometry, this list will grow with different things. Okay. Also, when you started up and created your account, and when you started for the first time, you probably saw a data panel, which is this guy here, which you can open and shut. Okay. And the data panel essentially gives us access to different projects that we're working on. Okay. And the nice thing about the data panel is that I can create a new project. So for instance, Intro to 3D Modeling. And then I can save some of my objects within that project. And then I can collaborate, upload to all sorts of things. Okay. The final thing that I want to show you is these toolboards across here. Okay. For the majority of what we're going to do, we're going to be sticking with InDesign. These are some of the other elements where obviously we can do renders and animations, simulations, create manufacturing tools, or process CNC paths, CAD to CAM. But for all intents and purposes, we're just going to be staying within the design menu. Okay? And you can see here we've got create, modify, assemble, construct, inspect, insert, and select. The first is our creation toolbar. So this is essentially what gets us going with creating our geometry and then creating our objects as a result of that. Our modify tool gives us a combination of modifying some of the things that we might create, but also being able to move, give them physical appearance and certain parameters. Assemble, which is something we'll be looking at in later tutorials, is when we start to have multiple components within a file, or we're bringing multiple components from separate files together into one file. We can start to use real-world relations and join things together. Okay, and that's a really powerful element of parametric modeling. We've also got the construct plane, and this is essentially a toolbox of different elements that we can introduce that will help with our sketching and other modeling techniques. Okay, so at the moment we have this plane here, which is our top plane. But then we can create other planes which can help us with future processes. Forecourt inspection, so say you've modeled something up and you want to measure it or you want to do some analysis on it, we find it here. Your insert, so if you want to drop a decal in, or select is here if we're trying to grab certain elements. Okay. Finally, we also have this timeline here. The timeline's empty at the moment, but when we start to create within Fusion 360, you'll see that each element that we create will be populated along this timeline. The beauty of this system is it means that we can easily see what happened when, so it's much like the undo and the redo, but it's visual. We can also come back and we can grab those elements and edit them in the timeline. So we don't have to undo, and then make a change and break anything that we did downstream, as if happens in, say, Microsoft Word or Illustrator and Photoshop. So the timeline is a really useful function as well.